Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
You can't criticise the Prime Minister of Israel or indeed the actions of the country of Israel without being called anti-Semitic. That's actually true, oddly. Someone will call you anti-Semitic if you do that, somebody somewhere. The question really is one of intellectual confidence, moral confidence, which means you are your own moral compass. You know where the line is. For example, some lessons that I've learned in recent years are the importance of distinguishing between the agents responsible for actions and the people who are not. So where once I might have said Israel, I would now say Benjamin Netanyahu or Likud, his party. Or where once I might have said Israel, I would now say the Israeli government. Do you see what I mean? Because this is the weirdest thing about the way that identity politics is going at the moment, especially to refer to the poor fellow in the last hour who started shouting about Brexit. This concept of foreignness it doesn't actually make any sense, because I'm pretty sure that most of the biggest Brexit headbangers would rather have their what we're going to say economic welfare depending upon Angela Merkel than on Jeremy Corbyn. Do you see what I mean? They don't actually. The foreignness is the biggest red herring of all, because Jeremy Corbyn is British. So all these people saying take back control, take back control. What if Jeremy Corbyn is Prime Minister for 30 years and you're a sort of crypto-fascist or just very, very right-wing? How are you going to feel about that? What would you rather have? Somebody like Gisela Stewart, who's German and pro-Brexit, or somebody like Anna Soubry, who's British and anti-Brexit? So it's not actually about identity, even though people pretend that it is. And that was helpful for me. And as with many subjects, I've learned from you and calls, sometimes from the nasty calls and the rude communications. I learned stuff, but mostly it's as you'd expect from the people who take the time to properly explain positions. And so you can have loads and loads of people who live in Israel, who passionately believe in the right of the state of Israel to exist, but who are passionately opposed to some of the policies that the current Israeli government follows. All of which is a sort of big introduction to a conversation that I have no idea in which way this conversation is going to go. I'd like to speak to the people who are often-minded, hopefully we can keep this friendly, who do reach very quickly for accusations of anti-Semitism whenever Israel is criticised or the Israeli government is criticised, because I would hope, and this is perhaps a little naive of me, but I would hope that you will agree with me when I say to you that this is really, really grim. This is from the office of the Prime Minister of Israel. Let me read it to you. And this is the bit where I suggested an hour ago you won't believe me. The weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. The strong are respected, and alliances are made with the strong, and in the end, peace is made with the strong. Now, the Labour Party, as you know, is riven, and the Frank Field story today, talk about a rock and a hard place. You'll allow me not to pick a side, will you, in a fight between Frank Field and Jeremy Corbyn? Or do we all have to pick a side with every single argument and debate? Well, I'm not going to. There you go. I'm going to swim against that particular tide. I can't choose between them for who I find the most unprepossessing. So you know that the anti-Semitism shadow is already cast over this story. Benjamin Netanyahu was at the renaming ceremony for the Shimon Peres Negev Nuclear Research Center. He spoke of Shimon Peres's aspirations towards peace and added he knew that true peace can be achieved only if our hands strongly grasp defensive weaponry. In the Middle East and in many parts of the world, there is a simple truth: there is no place for the weak. And it leads to this, which I'm going to read to you again. The weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. The strong are respected, and alliances are made with the strong, and in the end, peace is made with the strong. Now, weirdly, you see him as describing why Israel needs to be strong. That would have been understandable and fine. But talking about what happens to the weak is, to me, among the ugliest interventions I've ever seen by a world leader in my lifetime, especially one from a democratic country. The weak crumble, are slaughtered, and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. Now, if you subscribe to the school of thought, and it is a widespread school of thought that says that the Palestinian people are treated appallingly by the Israeli government, I wonder how you read this. The weak crumble, are slaughtered, and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. How would you read that? 0345 6060 973. It is possible, as I have just demonstrated, to criticise the Prime Minister of Israel without veering into any remotely anti-Semitic territory, although one has to suspect that some people will try, perhaps, we'll find out, to suggest that we have veered into that territory. I am, for the record, supremely confident that we have not. But I'm not supremely confident to reach any further at this point and tell you what those words remind me of ideologically and politically. The weak crumble, are slaughtered, and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. I will, however, again with supreme confidence, tell you that for me personally, I read that tweet while I was listening to an interview with the deputy leader of a German political party that is essentially bringing Nazism back into the mainstream. And perhaps it was just a coincidence, but as they were talking about Hitler's salutes being raised on German streets last night, I read that tweet. The weak crumble, are slaughtered, and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. And I haven't yet, subsequently, been able to separate the two experiences from each other. Not Israel defending its need to be strong. That's one thing I can get my head around. But the Prime Minister of Israel describing the weak crumble, are slaughtered, and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. What does he mean? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I don't necessarily want to bring it back to British politics. It may be that we can't help it, but I'm just genuinely, as always on this programme, fascinated by the words that are used, and the defence that will perhaps be employed, because I'm trying to think of another context in which a politician could stand on the world stage and say the weak crumble, are slaughtered, and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. Wow. Sarah's in Woodford. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'm really quite upset at hearing that tweet. I didn't see it myself, but I completely agree with you. It's unacceptable for a world leader to tweet such a thing, particularly given what he and his government have been accused of. We all know about their treatment of the Palestinian people. And what else are we supposed to relate to when he says that he's going to, that the weak should be slaughtered?
He doesn't say that they should be, to be absolutely fair. He says that they will be.
They will be slaughtered. I mean, he's...
And he would no doubt dispute furiously that he was referring in any way, shape or form to the Palestinian people.
Would.
Yes.
Of course, I'm sure many people would dispute that, but I would ask them, what do you think he is referring to then? Which weak people is he referring to?
Well, there you go. I can put that on my list. Who is he referring? Yeah. Who are the weak people who he says will be slaughtered and erased from history?
Who does he want to be erased from history as well? Because I think a lot of people would argue that he wants the Palestinian people to be erased from history.
Well, he's probably talking about Jewish... Oddly, I think he's talking about Jewish people, isn't he? He's saying if we are not really, really strong, we will be erased from history.
Well, I'm not so sure. I think he's saying that the weak will be erased from history, and that's sort of a taunt, in a way, at the Palestinian people, rather than saying we will be, because I don't think he believes that Jewish people will be erased from history, and of course nobody should be. But to say that anyone should be is absolutely abhorrent.
Well, again, he's not saying should be, he's saying will be, although I completely understand why you might consider that line to be somewhat perforated. The weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, while the strong for good or for ill survive. The strong are respected, and alliances are made with the strong. And in the end, peace is made with the strong. I'm making no apologies for casting your thoughts towards the question of what kind of historical political leaders that language would have sat comfortably upon the lips of. Let's examine it further. The process of normalization by leading countries, he writes, in the Arab world with the strong state of Israel is happening before our eyes on a scale that would have been impossible to imagine a few years ago. Is this relevant, scholars of the region will tell me, to the fact that it was Shimon Peres that was being honoured? To my far from extensive knowledge of the era, that period, wasn't Shimon Peres a very, very different politician in terms of peace to Benjamin Netanyahu? Were they not, I mean, perceivable as chalk and cheese in many ways? Could that be relevant to why he's felt the need to make these points? The process bears hope within it that in the end the cycle of peace will be completed, but it is impossible to deny the fact that there are yet many enemies in this region and beyond. I mean, it is a little warmongering, perhaps. The only way we can be safe is by attacking and destroying the weak, perhaps, he's saying. And that should frighten all of us, shouldn't it? It's 11:15. And it's, I always do this. I've mentioned it a couple of times this week when I come back from a holiday, or indeed a Holly Bob's. I find myself really drawn towards the stories that on other days when I'm feeling a bit tired, when I'm at the end of a because I don't think I've got another break now till Christmas. Could you please get out the world's smallest violin? I'm drawn towards the stories where when my psychic energy is low, I don't have the stomach for. It's I don't know what do you call it? It's like feeling feisty, isn't it? It's come on, let's do the really tough stuff, because A, so few people do now in the British media, and B, we've built up such a quality of caller now over the years that we can do really hardcore stuff and learn and have intelligent conversations. And that is why I'm reading you again a tweet that's been issued by the Prime Minister of Israel, and I'm going to ask you to explain it to me. The weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. The strong are respected, and alliances are made with the strong, and in the end, peace is made with the strong. Jonathan's in Billericay. Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, how you doing? Okay, so I've got an insight into this. I've got a family member I spoke to last night that works for the Ministry of Interior in Israel.
Okay.
I saw the tweet, phoned him up and said, you know, what the hell is that about? And he said it's being discussed all amongst ministry people and so on.
Is it?
The Prime Minister's office tweets in 3 languages, obviously Hebrew, English and Arabic. And when it tweets in each language, it's tweeting to a different group of people. Now, that tweet should have only have gone out in Arabic. Someone sent it out in English as well. And what that tweet was to do with, it was a kind of buttering up of Hamas. I don't know if you're aware that the Israeli government and Hamas are in kind of negotiations via Egypt.
Yes.
For a long-term truce, a long-term peace agreement. And when you talk to an Arab leadership, you talk in a different language than you talk to if you're talking to a European government or so on. And that is all about...
I mean, even if it had only gone out in Arabic, a journalist would have translated it and it would have been a story.
No, not really, because they tweet...
Well, mate, I'm a journalist.
All the time. No, listen, let me tell you something. Tweets are going out in Arabic all the time.
Yeah.
Have you ever listened to Al Jazeera in Arabic?
Obviously not, mate. I struggle to speak French.
Well,
so what then? How does it butter up Hamas?
Because it's talking about them as the strong, and the weak. I think, or he thinks, my cousin, he thinks that the weak is Fatah. So Fatah and Hamas are loggerheads at the moment. Because
but the next tweet says this process of normalisation by leading countries in the Arab world with the strong state of Israel is happening before our eyes on a scale that would have been impossible to imagine a few years ago. The process bears hope, but in the end, the cycle of peace will be completed. It's impossible to deny the fact that there are yet many enemies in this region and beyond. We're working to prevent Iran from establishing military presence in Syria.
So, and you see a problem with that tweet? I don't.
No, I don't see a problem with what I've just read out to you. I only see a problem. It poses a problem for your theory that he's trying to butter up Hamas by saying that the weak crumble.
Well, why don't you just listen for a second? I'll explain.
Well, go on then. There's no need to be rude, Jonathan.
All right. So Fatah and Hamas are at loggerheads. There's one body in the Arab world that doesn't want this peace agreement between Israel and Hamas, and that, surprisingly, is Fatah. Or if you know about the politics over there, it's not surprisingly.
Yes. Okay, I understand that. He's buttering up Hamas. He's trying to drive a wedge between them and Fatah. Why does the succession of tweets end like this? Perhaps your friend in the Israeli government told you, or your family member. In the military sphere, the Israeli Defense Force will continue to take strong and determined action against Iran's attempts to station forces and advanced weapon systems in Syria. No agreement between Syria and Iran will deter us. Neither will any threat deter us.
So I thought we were discussing another tweet. You want to discuss the second tweet?
No, they're all linked, mate. It's what's called a thread.
Where is it? Well, I only spoke to him about the first tweet.
No, it's not the first. It's the third.
Well, I don't see any. I spoke to him about that tweet, the tweet you mentioned.
But that's the third. That doesn't make sense.
That's the one I spoke to him about.
Yeah, but it doesn't make sense unless it's preceded by the one where he talks about Shimon Peres aspiring towards peace, and is followed by the one where he talks about the process of normalisation by leading countries.
Listen, fella.
I am listening, fella. I think the problem here is that you're not.
You're trying to combine everything. We were talking about the one tweet.
No, we were never talking about the one tweet. We've read them all out. It begins with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu attended the renaming ceremony for the Shimon Peres Negev Nuclear Research Centre.
I was talking about the one that should have gone out in Arabic. That's the one I found out.
But they're all in the same thread.
Well, I just told you. I didn't say. I don't know about those two.
Well, then perhaps if you don't know what you're talking about, fella, you're the one that should be listening. Paul's in Hendon. Paul, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. I think it's a silly tweet because if you're not Jewish, I think you read it rightly as you read it, and it does not read well. But I read it before you listened to your program today. And as a Jew, it only occurred to me that he was talking about Jewish people.
Same here. But then we enter the realms of the double standard, don't we? Because you're going to say if he's talking about Jewish people, it's fine. But if he's talking about someone else, it's really, really bad.
I don't think that's a double standard. I think that's true.
Well,
I think if he's talking about Jewish people, it's fine. I think if he's talking about other people, it's bad. I don't think he's talking about other people, and I'll tell you why. It's difficult to explain, but it's in the Jewish consciousness.
Possibly it's impossible to explain, but I'm going to listen to you carefully.
Well, okay, it's in the Jewish consciousness, and it has been for hundreds of years, that the reason that we have been kicked out from country to country, slaughtered from country to country, genocides, pogroms and everything else, culminating in the Holocaust, is because of our weakness. It's always been within us that we are a weak group of people. There's only 15 million of us. And because we didn't have a country, an army, a protection in any way, sort or form, anywhere in the world, we suffered for hundreds of years.
I'm sure,
and that's because of our weakness.
Yes.
And
therefore, you need to be like the agencies of that oppression, and ultimately, to use your own words, you need to be more like the people that did the Holocaust than like the people that suffered in it. Is that what he's saying?
I don't think I said that.
No, but you mentioned the Holocaust and pogroms and talked about the Jewish people being the victims of them. So the weak crumble, and then he goes on and says the strong survive, the strong are respected, and alliances are made with the strong. So he's saying we need to be like the strong. And your own analysis was that the strong do terrible things to the Jews.
I didn't say that. I said
you did, mate.
Bad people do terrible things. The strong don't.
You said we were weak. You said we were weak, and that's why these things happened to us.
Yeah, but I didn't say it happened to us because other people were strong.
Oh, okay. Okay, no, that's fine. We can let that pass.
Well, I don't know why. I'm not arguing. I'm just...
No, nor am I.
I'm saying to you that... Okay, so
what does who does he mean when he talks about the strong, then?
Well, now he's talking about Israel, not strong as in wicked, strong as in now we are strong, we can create a peace and a safeness. Well, that's why it was talking about Shimon Peres in front of...
So why talk about slaughter and erasure, do you think? Erasure, not the band.
Because Jews for hundreds of years have been slaughtered and erased from history.
By whom?
6 million were erased from history
by whom?
Nazis. By 70 years ago by Nazis. Prior to that, by Russian governments.
And where does the word "the strong are respected" fit into that? Peace is made with the strong.
Yes, We weren't able to make peace and protect ourselves because we were weak.
Yeah.
If we had been strong, we could have made peace and protected ourselves. Not if we were strong, we can go and slaughter people like the Nazis did. That's not the point of it. The point of it is it's the same as London, it's the same as UK, it's the same as the United States. They are strong. That doesn't mean that they go around slaughtering people. It means that they have a certain ability to protect themselves.
No, but the statement is that the weak are slaughtered and are erased from history. I think you're right in terms of what...
Is that untrue?
Well, I just said I think you're right in terms of what you're describing to me, and it's where I came from. But what perhaps troubles me, listening to you, is... I hope I don't misrepresent you. You have plenty of time to respond. The language is horrible.
I agree.
Oh, good. Okay. So why has he done it then? Who's he speaking to, really? Because the last fellow tried to claim he was speaking to Hamas. I think we can all chalk that up as absolutely bonkers. Who is this?
I don't know. I don't know. Honestly,
Right.
don't know. I like to think it was an ill thought out tweet, and perhaps he was speaking to the people as he was speaking to at the time he gave it, which was a group of Jewish people, and perhaps it was meant for his country, for Jewish people in his country, or around the world. I don't know, but I agree with you. The language is not good. I 100% agree with you.
It's worse than not good. I mean, it has some of the most sinister echoes imaginable, this language, doesn't it?
It does if you look at it from the perspective of an attacking tweet. This is what we're going to do.
Well, that's where
It doesn't if you look at the perspective of this is who we were. We don't want it to happen to us again.
Yeah, except it does for someone who's truly objective, because what you're really doing is say we need to adopt the ideas or the tactics of our historical enemies in order to be safe. Whereas for someone who is on neither side, if you like, that means we need to be as bad as they are in order to make sure they can't be bad to us.
But let's take it from another perspective. If, let's say, British people had been slaughtered 70 years ago, and let's say that 20 million British people were slaughtered because we were a weak country, we had no army, we had no weaponry.
There was no country.
And then today Prime Minister May gives a speech where she says, the weak fall, and we're no longer weak, and we will no longer fall.
Yes, and the weak and the people who are weak will be slaughtered and erased from history, because he's certainly not claiming that there aren't going to be any weak people left on the planet. So one then worries who's going to be doing the slaughtering and the erasing from history.
Well, that may be, but you can't accuse somebody of doing the slaughtering and erasing from history.
No one has. No one has.
Telling you a fact about unfortunate things that happen to weak people because they know...
Well, if I was in the Middle East feeling weak, I'd be absolutely terrified by this statement from essentially the most powerful, militarily, the most powerful country in that part of the region.
I agree. If you feel that it was speaking to you as a weak person in the Middle East, then I agree with you. I was just saying to you.
I hear you, and I'm glad that we've sort of arrived at a sort of form of concord, and I do. And I've spoken at length about understanding the central thrust of your argument, and I understand why you defend the phrase double standard, because I think you're right to do so. If I had spent my life in the shadow of the Holocaust, and not just the Holocaust, but centuries of persecution, and that knowledge, that belief that many, many Jewish families have that everything is temporary until the next time comes along. And oddly for me, it's the persecution of British Muslims that's made me realise that these ancient hatreds are never far from the surface. But my job is objectivity, and I thank you for helping me. Phil in Gibraltar takes this conversation up to a new level. He writes, why are we discussing the tweets of a man who has descended into ultra-right-wing nationalism and trying to find a nuance in his words? He's calling the Arab world weak, Israel strong, and its alliances stronger. It's vile rhetoric, and it's not uncommon. He's speaking to the US hard right. What is he saying? He is saying the weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. The strong are respected and alliances are made with the strong, and in the end, peace is made with the strong. And if you're just joining us, you will, I suspect, be as shocked as I was to discover that those words come from the office of the Prime Minister of Israel. I'm just trying to understand them a little better. And I do in a way. I mean, what he is saying is that if we are not very, very strong, then historical horrors will be repeated. And I, for one, am not going to argue with the accuracy of the historical horrors, the existence of the historical horrors. But for my money, it looks a little bit like if you can't beat them, join them rhetoric, to put it simplistically. Charlotte's in Kensington. Charlotte, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. You said yourself that you understand Israel's need for strong military defense. But why is that necessary? Well, you said earlier you can understand his argument that you need to be strong and that Israel needs a strong defense.
I tell you, can I cautiously suggest that we talk about what you think rather than what you think I think?
Well, I'm just trying to lay it out, because if you accept that Israel needs a strong military defense force, then you have to ask why. And I think that's clear from the history of the State of Israel. The truth is that if it doesn't have a strong military defense, then it is the weak one in what is a very difficult neighborhood. We only have to look at the history of the Jewish state. I know a lot of reference has been made to the history of Jews being oppressed, and it is a very long history indeed, and a very tragic one. But if you look to the history of the Jewish state, you need to remember it's been at constant wars since its inception. Hours after it declared independence, it was attacked by 5 Arab armies, and since then it has continually had to fight for its own survival. 48, 56, 67, 73, I could go on.
Well, you could, and I sense you will if I don't interrupt, but I'm very interested in what these words mean, because the necessity of a military deterrent or a defence force is something that I don't think anyone would debate. It's the choice of language that we're discussing today. The weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. Now, under your analysis, if I've understood it correctly, you're explaining why Netanyahu is right to seek to be strong. Why on earth would he employ language like this? Who is it aimed at?
Because that's exactly why Israel needs to be strong.
Well, then everybody does.
Well, no, because not everybody is surrounded by Syria.
No, but everybody weak is going to get slaughtered and erased from history, so everybody needs nuclear bombs. Everybody needs to be strong, otherwise they'll be slaughtered and erased from history.
Not at all, James.
Oh, so explain that to me more, Charlotte, please.
You need to be strong if you're facing a constant existential threat.
Yes.
That is why he's using this language, because Britain...
Why didn't he say that, then?
We're not being threatened...
Well, why didn't he say that, then?
Well, I think it's clear from the context. It's clear if you have any idea of the background of Israel's history and its fight for survival.
Oh, okay. I see. So the weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, and 3 tweets later he's talking about the necessity of fighting against Iran. So Iran now would think, well, if we're weak, we're going to crumble and get slaughtered and erased from history, so we better get some nuclear bombs too.
Well, out of the two, the only state that's calling for a slaughter of another is Iran, calling for the slaughter of Jews.
Well, to be fair, the Prime Minister of Israel is saying that the weak will be slaughtered and erased from history. So if I was in the sights of the Prime Minister of Israel, I'd be pretty keen to not be weak anymore. Wouldn't you?
Well, James...
Charlotte?
The reason why the weak... He's saying...
Let me phrase the question again, if you haven't understood it properly. He is targeting Iran in this succession of tweets. He is describing the weak as crumbling, being slaughtered and erased from history. If I was Iran, I'd feel pretty acutely that we needed to get strong pretty quickly, wouldn't you?
I think you're not clear here on who's threatening whom.
Oh, okay.
Iran is threatening Israel. Israel is not out to destroy...
We're working to prevent Iran from establishing a military presence in Syria. We won't relent in pursuit of this goal, as we did not relent in bringing about the cancellation of the bad nuclear deal with Iran. A goal seems impossible when I put it on the international agenda several years ago. How is that evidence of Israel being under threat?
James, that's because Iran and its proxies throughout Syria and Lebanon, Hezbollah, are a constant threat to Israel.
And indeed, if they were feeling weak and knew that Netanyahu believes that means they will crumble, be slaughtered and erased from history, what would their logical reaction be?
I'm sorry.
So am I.
They are the ones threatening Israel here, James.
In a tweet that says we're working to prevent Iran from establishing military presence in Syria.
You're only slaughtered if you're weak and you are being threatened.
Precisely. So if you're Iran and you're being told here that we're working to prevent you from establishing a military presence in Syria, and you want to establish a military presence in Syria, then Netanyahu is telling them that he's going to slaughter them.
James, that's defensive.
Pardon?
There's a big difference.
Oh, okay.
He's saying if Iran is continuing in its threats towards Israel, building...
But he's not, though. I mean, I've got the words in front of me, Charlotte, and I admire your... acrobatics, but you can't tell me what he's saying while I'm reading out what he's actually saying and telling me that I've got it wrong.
Sorry, how in his words is he's saying that Iran is going to be crushed, even if it's not.
No, that's where you've gone now. You're saying that the weak will.
That's what you're insinuating.
I'm not insinuating anything. You've spent 5 minutes trying to tell me that this isn't what Benjamin Netanyahu said, and it is. I'm reading it to you.
Which bit are you looking at?
The weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, while the strong for good or for ill survive. 3 tweets later, he's talking about the need to prevent Iran from establishing a military presence in Syria. So if you were Iran, I'll ask you for the final time, and you had read that the Prime Minister of Israel thinks that if you're not strong, you will be slaughtered and erased from history, how would you respond?
Iran is going to continue to try and destroy Israel, no matter what Benjamin Netanyahu said.
Okay, so I mean,
Israel will defend itself.
Of course, no. We've been here already. Are you going to answer my question?
I've answered the question, James.
But are you going to answer the question I asked, which is what would you do if the person who's announced military intentions against you was describing the weak as being slaughtered and erased from history?
I would get rid of my nuclear arms. I would come to the table and I would make a peace deal with an entity that I know I will never...
So you think Israel should abandon its nuclear capabilities?
No, I'm talking about Iran.
Oh, I thought you might be. It's 11:41. Richard's in Jerusalem. Richard, what's going on?
Hi, James. I have to say I really don't understand exactly what's the big deal about. I mean, it's not the first time he's ever said anything like that. It's not the second time he repeats that all and over again. In fact, when you first declared the topic, I thought to myself, what tweet? And kept looking online. Is there something special?
I think that's because you live in Jerusalem and I live in London. So, I mean, it jumped out at me from my Twitter feed this morning. I'm perfectly happy to accept that it's not remarkable for him at all, but it's remarkable for me because I've never seen it before. So tell me why it's utterly unremarkable. The weak, and I'll just remind you of the exact words, the weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. And the consensus from our callers, which you're free to challenge, is that he's casting Israel as being the strong now rather than the weak.
Well, not exactly. Let me put it this way. What he's saying is that Israel must be strong because peace will only be made with the strong part. If you're weak, they will stamp over you in the Middle East.
Yes. Now,
he's not saying at all, I don't know how you got to it, that he's saying that we will challenge or we will kill the weak. That's not at all what
No, I know. He just said it would happen. Well, because he said the weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or ill, survive. I mean, it's not a massive leap from that to conclude that he means the weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive.
He's describing the situation as it is now.
Yes.
As it is now in the Middle East. This is not Switzerland.
Weak now in the Middle East, then?
Not the first time.
Who are the weak now in the Middle East, then?
He's saying we should not become the weak as Israel was.
No, you just said he was describing the situation now, not the future. So who are the weak currently in the Middle East?
He's describing the situations of minorities in small countries that are unable to protect themselves.
So who in the Middle East at the moment is the weak?
Israel is not weak. I've never claimed that Israel is weak. It didn't show.
No, I'm asking who is.
That's never what I said.
I'm asking who is because you stated that this was a description of the modern situation in the Middle East. So who is the weak?
That is a description. That is a description of how weaks are treated in the Middle East.
Yeah. So who are the weak in the Middle East?
Group and it could be the Yazidis, it could be the Kurds, it could be pretty much anyone that's really inferior in terms of military power.
Right, and who has the greatest military power?
That what he said is...
Who's the strong, then?
If you'll allow me, James, if you'll allow me, what he was trying to say is that...
Well, are you doing it again? Why can't you focus on what he actually said instead of what you wish he had said? We can have an argument about what you think he was trying to say, but I'm seeking to understand what he actually did say. So under your own vocabulary and analysis... We've established some of the people that could be construed as weak in the current Middle Eastern context. Who could be realistically and reasonably described as the strong?
I don't understand why you don't understand my answer. I gave you the answer. The answer is that he's describing how weaks are treated in the Middle East.
Yes,
and this is why
that's why I asked who are the weak in the Middle East. All right, let's just do it in the context of Israel-Palestine. Who's strong? Who's strong? Who's weak?
Of course Israel is a stronger military power.
So if you were Palestinian and you heard the Prime Minister of the strong say that the weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, how would you feel?
Can I get a word in edgewise?
As long as you answer the questions I ask.
Get a word in edgewise, because
So what question did I just ask?
Over and over.
What question did I just ask?
You asked me who is the strong and who is the weak, and I'm trying to tell you that he makes a bigger point, which relates to one of the other tweets that you've also mentioned that he made, which is said that we're seeing an alliance with Arab countries that we've never saw before. He's absolutely right, and there's a reason for it, and it has to do with the original tweet that you were talking about. It has to do with the fact that Israel is becoming a military, well, it's not becoming, it has been for a very long time, a military power, and this goes back to a point that I've been trying to make for a very long time, that in general, when two people or two countries fight between one another for decades, it never comes because some liberal comes from Europe and gives them the idea that, and they say, "Oh, we never thought about that. Yes. Let's try that for a second." It only comes after one side realizes that they've conceded, that they've lost.
And they've crumbled, they've been slaughtered, and
they won.
And they're close to being erased from history. I think I've understood everything you said. I suspect that's what you're so upset about. In the next hour, one of the hardiest of perennials of the radio phone-in canon. Competition gets the sack from school sports days. This looks at government figures showing a sharp fall in the proportion of young children taking part in a competitive sports day last summer. I used to get my knickers in a right old twist about this. I sometimes forget why. It's just so odd, isn't it? I know I sort of spend my life criticising other people for being led by the nose to positions that they don't really understand. That first hour of the programme today is a very good example of that, with the conflicting barrage balloons of Donald Trump and Sadiq Khan prompting such violently different reactions from the relevant constituencies. But I can't really remember. I'm pretty sure that, because I was quite good at exams and not that good at games, I'm pretty sure I used to argue that the lads who weren't very good at exams but were good at games deserved their day in the sun, you know? So they deserved their victories, because I'd come top in English and 10th in the 100 metres, and the lad who came 10th in English and first in the 100 metres, it would be wrong for me to get my pat on the back and public plaudit, and him to be told that on sports day we're all going to run around in a circle and there won't be any winners or losers. But I don't know that I think that anymore. We'll get stuck into this story after 12 noon. I look forward to your help examining. And at the moment we're, oh dear, I told you it was going to be tricky. We're examining a tweet by the Prime Minister of Israel, which a caller from Jerusalem has just told me is utterly unremarkable. If that is the case, then I think my shock's even greater than it was when I thought that it was remarkable. If this is commonplace from the Israeli Prime Minister, then perhaps understanding why Israel and anti-Semitism have played such a key part in British politics in the last few months in the context of the Labour Party comes into a slightly different relief. The weak crumble, are slaughtered and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. The strong are respected and alliances are made with the strong, and in the end peace is made with the strong. John's in Cambridge. John, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I think, like yourself, with the last caller, I was slightly shocked by what he deemed to be the quite normal commentary by Benjamin Netanyahu, because
that was his claim, and I don't know enough to confirm or deny.
But I mean, with
although I am now following this account, so I shall be keeping a closer eye on it than I have in the past.
I know, because I was thinking, well, surely if that's sort of done every day, I mean, it just seems to stand out so much, and it's never seemed to be on the airwaves that much. But I mean, with regards to your last callers, I mean, the normalisation of language like this, because language seems to have, the meaning seems to have gone out the window nowadays with regards to politics. And when you hear, for instance, Benjamin Netanyahu has obviously seemed to also claim a strong relationship with Donald Trump, and his use of language, we all know, is just like, I didn't mean that. This means that. Everything is all false.
Don't believe what you see and hear. Believe what I tell you. I think he said that recently, Trump, to a military veterans rally.
Exactly, and I think when it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu's saying that, it's almost like he's doffing his cap to, say, America, saying, well, by the way, we've got our friends in America who not only fund us, but also will stand by us in any sort of, whatever happens in the future. But I mean, with the language that he used is incredibly. I mean, it sort of sheds light on a few things from the past that obviously we wouldn't want to go into too much. But
well, it's who he's addressing, because I mean, there's slightly more sensible arguments that we've heard would be, if it was policy based, that's fine. If he was arguing why we need a strong military and even citing history as a reason why, but it's this description of what happens to the weak that I can't understand why he would do it. The weak crumble, are slaughtered, and are erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. I mean, that's violent rhetoric.
If I may, James,
yes.
there was one time. There are a few occasions where I've had the opportunity, just through friends of friends, to meet some Israelis who have served their time in the Israeli military. And what always seems to be the common parlance, because I never felt necessarily comfortable with regards to perhaps talking about, Israel, Palestine, because first of all, I didn't know enough about it, and I didn't want to feel like I was sort of showing disapproval in the wrong areas. However, when I spoke to, this was at this particular occasion, it was at a dinner thing, these three people who, seem, again, everyday, perfectly reasonable people, but on this particular subject with regards to Israel and stuff, it was very dogmatic. There is only one way, because I was speaking to this...
Yes, but I get that, oddly, and I know that not everybody does, but I do, and it sounds like a very odd thing to say, but it is the rise of Donald Trump that has given me an understanding of Jewish psychology that I didn't have before. It is that the suitcase packed under the bed, because even though Trump's bigotry and racism isn't directed at Jewish people, when bigotry and racism rear their ugly heads, Jewish people are almost always on the list. So I get that, and I understand why someone like Netanyahu can appeal to that. And
but what I mean is in a military context, because all these people are in a military context, they go into military service. I mean, I was speaking to this very charming young woman who, you wouldn't have expected her, but she was a tank commander.
Yes.
And I was there going, wow, you're a tank commander, that's kind of ridiculous. And you just sort of think... Nice moves,
John.
But it was just extraordinary to speak to her when she was so... It almost seemed... I was going to say unreasonable in certain views she had on the whole outlook of... Well,
that's what this speaks to, the idea that we can do whatever we want because the alternative is being slaughtered and erased from history. And that's where the logic lies. And that's where, in many ways, the twain meet, although I find it frightening, that kind of language, whoever it comes from. And supporters of Netanyahu, or defenders of this language, would say, no, I find it frightening as well, except when it comes from him. And that is, I think, just a statement of fact rather than opinion. I could be wrong. Rob's in Hayes. Actually, before we speak to Rob in Hayes, this is rather good from Ant, who's in Ware. He says, blimey, let's just hope that no one launches a Netanyahu balloon. I'll tell you what, mate, I'll give you that. Rob, what would you like to say?
I think if you take away the fact that this is from the Prime Minister of Israel, any other person coming out with these words, you'd say they're a fascist. Straight away, you wouldn't even have the thought process going.
Yeah, but but the Prime Minister of Israel speaks in the shadow of regimes that sought to destroy Jewish people and sought to obliterate them. So it isn't, I don't think, a completely fair comparison, is it?
I think it is, because I think if I said to you, Putin said that, or Donald Trump said that, or Modi said that, or certain sections of our parliament said that, you'd have said, I half expect them to say things like that. That's the problem. You see, what it is that it could have come from any number of people who are in
so
charge.
it is this strong man fetishization that seems to be abroad at the moment, everywhere from Hungary to Russia, and in a sort of pantomime weird version in America as well.
Yeah, I talked to you the other day about consequences to killing people.
Yes.
When there's no consequences, this is the kind of rhetoric that you can come out with because no one's going to challenge you. Now, the other thing is...
Do you know whether it's normal, this, as Jonathan said? Was it Jonathan in Jerusalem? The fellow in Jerusalem, anyway. Does Netanyahu always talk like this?
I think that he's emboldened to say certain things.
Yes.
That's what's happened. Now... It's happening all around the world for a particular reason, James, and it sort of does link into Brexit, but that's a slightly different thing. And what it is to do with the age demographic of people who are now in charge around the world. So they're between 50 and 70. They're now emboldened to come out with their right-wing views, And this is their last gasp, James, and we have to understand that.
Well,
in the next 20 years, all these people will be gone.
Yes, it's a view. It's an interesting view, actually, that I shall devote more thought to. I'll read out one of these tweets, because we did say that they would come in. I am so sick of your anti-Semitic ramble. So there it is, the accusation of anti-Semitism being laid at me for being troubled by a world leader talking about the weak crumbling, being slaughtered and erased from history. The tweet refers to the fact that the Jews have been persecuted for centuries. Had we been weak, we would have crumbled and been obliterated on many occasions. He's just saying that we are strong and have survived. He is not making threats. He is just showing that strong and united we stand and will not be obliterated. And here it is, by the likes of you and your anti-Semitic Corbyn supporting friends. Can't win. Can all the people who attack me for being critical of Jeremy Corbyn, and then all the people who subscribe to this school of thought that I am in cahoots with my anti-Semitic Corbyn supporting friends, just fight each other and leave me out of it?